The day I signed those divorce papers, I felt nothing but relief. I told myself I was finally free from his silence, his empty pockets, his embarrassing ordinariness. I told my mother, my friends, my coworkers, I wasted 4 years on a man who was going nowhere. What I never told anyone was the look on his face when I handed him the papers. He didn't cry. He didn't beg. He simply looked at me, steady, quiet, devastatingly calm, and said, "Lena, are you sure this is what you want?" I laughed. Actually laughed. "Kareem," I said, sliding the folder across the kitchen table. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He nodded once, picked up the pen, signed his name without hesitation. Then he stood, straightened his worn-out jacket, the one I used to mock at dinner parties, and walked out of our apartment without looking back. I poured myself a glass of wine and celebrated. That was the biggest mistake of my life. Let me tell you who Kareem Al-Rashid was when I married him. He was 26, soft-spoken, working a mid-level logistics job at a freight company nobody had ever heard of. He drove a 10-year-old car. He cooked his own meals. He read books instead of scrolling his phone. My friends called him sweet but forgettable. My mother called him placeholder. I called him not enough. But here is what none of us understood about Kareem, what I would spend the next 6 years learning in the most humiliating way possible. Quiet men are not empty men. Sometimes the stillest water runs the deepest, and sometimes the man you throw away in your 20s becomes the most powerful person in the room. Before you turn 35, I didn't know that yet. Standing in that kitchen, wine glass in hand, I only knew one thing. I was free. So why? 6 years later, was I sitting in his waiting room, trembling? After the divorce, I moved fast. Within 8 months, I was dating Samir, confident, loud, well-dressed Samir, who drove a new car and threw money at restaurants like it meant nothing. He was everything Kareem wasn't: flashy, ambitious, the kind of man who walked into a room and commanded it. My mother adored him immediately, as she said at Sunday lunch. "Squeezing my hand is the life you deserve." I believed her. I really did. But Samir's confidence turned out to be mostly costume. 2 years in, I discovered the car was leased. The apartment was his parents'. The money he threw at restaurants was credit card debt, quietly compounding in the background. When I confronted him, he shrugged. "Everyone lives like this, Lena. Don't be so dramatic." I left him too. Quieter that time. More embarrassed than angry. I was 31, single again, and for the first time, a small, unwelcome thought entered my mind. What if I had been wrong about Kareem? I pushed the thought down. I was good at that. The years moved. I climbed at work, marketing director by 32, decent salary, nice apartment. Life was not unhappy. It was simply hollow in places I didn't like to look at directly. Then the news broke. I was scrolling through a business journal one Thursday morning, just background noise with my coffee, when a headline stopped me. Cold. Al-Rashid Logistics completes $4.2 billion regional acquisition. CEO Kareem Al-Rashid named Industry Leader of the Year. I read the name 3 times. Then I looked at the photograph. It was him. Older, composed, dressed in a dark suit that cost more than my monthly rent. Standing in front of a glass tower with his name on it. My ex-husband, my nobody. My hands were shaking so badly that I dropped my coffee cup. It shattered on the kitchen floor, and I just stood there, barefoot, surrounded by broken ceramic, staring at his face on my screen.
Yes.
"Kareem," I whispered to no one. "What did you do?" I told myself curiosity was harmless. I told myself that reaching out after 6 years of silence was simply professional. I worked in marketing. He ran a major corporation. It was a logical connection to make. I rehearsed the message 12 times before I sent it. Casual, breezy, confident. "Kareem, it's Lena. Congratulations on everything. If you ever need a senior marketing perspective, I'd love to connect." I pressed send. Then I stared at my phone for 2 hours. His reply came the next morning. 3 words, my team will call. Not, Lena, how are you? Not, it's been so long. It's not even punctuation that suggested warmth. Just, my team will call. His assistant reached out that same afternoon to schedule a consultation. Corporate, formal, as if I were any vendor. Any stranger? Something about that stung in a place I couldn't name. The meeting was at his headquarters, a glass tower in the financial district that I had to tilt my head back to see the top of. I wore my best suit. I arrived 12 minutes early. I sat in the waiting room with other executives and tried not to look at the brass lettering on the wall, a Rashid Group. The man I'd laughed at across a kitchen table when they finally called my name and I walked into his office. I was prepared for many things. I was not prepared for her. A woman sat beside his desk, elegant, composed mid-30s. She introduced herself as his director of strategy. She smiled at me with the particular warmth of someone who already knew exactly who I was. Kareem stood when I entered. He shook my hand formally, briefly, and gestured to a chair. Lena, he said. Thank you for coming. That was it. No history in his voice. No edge, no warmth either. Just professionalism so complete it felt like a wall. I sat down. I gave my presentation. He listened. He asked sharp, precise questions. He was brilliant in a way that made my chest ache. Because I recognized it. I had always recognized it. I had simply chosen to call it going nowhere. When it was over, he said he would be in touch. I stood to leave. At the door, I stopped. I don't know what made me do it, pride, maybe, or something older and more honest than pride. Kareem, I said, are you well? He looked at me for a long moment. I am, he said. Are you? I couldn't answer, because standing in his doorway, in the shadow of everything he had quietly become, I realized something that cracked open a part of me I had kept sealed shut for 6 years. I had not divorced him. Because he wasn't enough, I had divorced him because I was afraid. He was better than me, and I hadn't wanted to wait long enough to find out. Asterisk. They offered me the contract, a 12-month marketing consultancy, generous, prestigious, exactly the kind of work that would elevate my entire career. I told myself it was purely business. I told myself I was over whatever guilt or grief or longing had cracked open in his doorway. Then his director of strategy, Nadia, called me personally. I wanted to speak with you before you sign, she said. Her voice was careful, kind even. There are things about this arrangement you should understand. We met for coffee the following morning. What she told me dismantled everything Kareem had not built his company after our divorce. He had been building it during our marriage, quietly, methodically, entirely in secret. The logistics job was real, but it was also cover. He had been negotiating acquisitions, building partnerships, laying infrastructure across 3 countries, while I had been at dinner parties calling him forgettable. He had hidden it. I asked. My voice came out smaller than I intended. Nadia wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. He told me once, she said slowly, that he needed to know if someone loved him before the empire, because after it, he would never be able to trust the answer. The cafe noise faded completely. He was testing people, I said. He was protecting himself, she corrected gently. I thought about the worn jacket, the 10-year-old car, the meals he cooked alone in a quiet kitchen while I complained to my friends about his ambition. I thought about his face when I slid the divorce papers across the table, that devastatingly calm look. I had mistaken for indifference. It wasn't indifference. It was grief. And it was an answer. I had failed his test without ever knowing I was taking it. Does he know you're telling me this? I whispered. Nadia met my eyes. He asked me to. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. Why? I said, why now? Why tell me at all? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, because he still has one question he never got the answer to. And I think, Lena, so do you. I signed the contract. I told myself it was professional. I told myself it was closure. I told myself many things in those first weeks. While I walked the halls of his company and pretended I was simply a consultant and not a woman quietly, reassembling every memory she had ever dismissed. We worked together for 3 months before he said anything real. It happened on a late evening, just the two of us in a conference room, reviewing campaign direction. City lights spread across the window behind him like a second skyline. He was reading something. I was watching him without meaning to. He looked up and caught me. Neither of us looked away. "Kareem," I said finally, "I owe you an apology." He set down his pen. "You don't," he said. "I was unkind. I was blind. I called you nothing when you were everything. I just wasn't willing to wait." He was quiet for a long time. "Lena," he said at last, "you didn't break me. You clarified something I needed clarified. I don't carry it as a wound. What do you carry it as?" I asked. He looked at me, the same steady, quiet look from across that kitchen table 6 years ago, except now I finally knew how to read it. "A lesson," he said. "The same one you're sitting with right now?" I nodded, because he was right. That was exactly what I was sitting with. We didn't rush into anything. That is not the kind of story this is. He was not waiting for me. I was not owed a second chapter simply because I had finally grown enough to want one. Please like, share, and subscribe.